Come on, baby, we painful time. And all that jazz, I'm gonna move my knees and roll my stockings down. And all that jazz, start the car right on a whoopee spot where the gin is cold but the piano's hot. It's just a noisy hall where there's a nightly brawl and all of that. There's a nightly brawl and all that. No one's right, but all of my life
Joel Gray is a magnificently mercurial talent who I have seen play many roles on the Broadway. But I've also seen him do very intimate work. For instance, at the McKittrick Hotel, I saw him sing there, and he was as magical and as glorious up close and personal as he is on the big stage. And he's a very kind man. Yes, you. I'd seen her in Sweet Charity as Nikki, and I was like, Debbie Allen was the Charity at the time, and that's why my parents brought me, because I was a huge fan of Debbie Allen, and you know, anybody who watched Fame in those days loved Debbie Allen. And I saw the show, and I was like, Debbie Schmebby, who is that? And I told her the whole story, and her response was exactly what you just saw right now. She was so loving and gracious and the consummate professional. William Ivey Long, costumer of this famed musical, was, even though I was in the ensemble, and I did cover Roxy, but even for my ensemble fittings, he was present for all of them. She's currently playing Mama Morton on Broadway. And you all know her from the Real Housewives of Atlanta, correct? And I think that's a really great thing about Chicago in general, is that I think it's lasted for 21 years, one, because it's more relevant now than ever in terms of our culture and our society, but also the producers have been very smart about having a rotating cast of celebrities that come out that infuse excitement for an entire new demographic and a whole new different fan group to come see the show. So that's very smart on their part, and welcome to the Chicago family.
Thank you.
So Bebe, why don't you kick us off and tell us about the journey, the initial journey from Encores, and what Encores is.
Yes, there's a wonderful series at City Center in the heart of New York City, the beautiful City Center Theater, and it is the Encore series. And at that time, it was only a few years old, this series, and they were staged musicals of lightly staged readings of musicals that had not been done for a long time, or had not been revived. People didn't usually do them. And so they did Pal Joey the year before, different things that, you know, were really terrific shows. And so Chicago was one of them. And we played for one weekend in May in 1996. And it was an Encores production. We held our scripts. There were big microphones at the end of the, right across the footlights. And we put our scripts down to dance, but we held on to them, you know, 6 merry murderesses with scripts in our laps. And, you know, I was mentioning, you know, in the hands of a very clever director, Walter Bobby, he had us all sitting there in our chairs, and we all turned the page at the same time. And it was a wonderful production, very, very spare, set, pretty much what you see on Broadway now. I think we added 2 elements to it. The costumes were very much the same. They were made beautiful and even more appropriate by William. And there was that rumor, because it was so beautifully received there, and the roof kept coming off of the theater, everybody loved the show. We didn't have to step out on stage. They just loved that show. And so the rumors, of course, started, we're going to Broadway, we're going to Broadway. And there's a saying I learned many years ago, which was, I'll believe we're going to Broadway when I see the closing notice. And it actually happened this time, and it went to Broadway.
I think because it was so extremely successful at Encores, they realized that the show could be valid and make that incredible impact without, changing sets and changing costumes and all of the accoutrement that usually comes with a big Broadway musical.
I had seen the original with Gwen Verdon and Cheetah Rivera. It was directed by Bob Fosse. How many years? What year was that?
It was
75.
Same year as Chorus One.
1975.
75, right.
Yes, William just remarked, same year as a chorus line. So it got very overshadowed at the time.
And I thought that the show I thought the performers were wonderful, but it was a full production with lots of sets and costumes and more realistic than we ended up doing, which turned out to be the way in which these lyrics and this music got the kind of focus. There was nothing to take away from what the creators made in terms of what they were having to say about the government. I mean, about
Justice system.
Justice system. Oh my God. The justice system. Anyway, my part was played by a wonderful actor whose name was Barney Martin. And he was 6'6", and he weighed about 250 pounds. And so when they called me to ask me to do it, I said, I don't think I'm right for that. And I said no. And I was in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine, Charlie Repoli, called me and he said, there's a great song. You're going to get to sing a great song, Mr. Cellophane. So I said, oh, and I came to New York, really not believing in myself as my character. And I met with Walter and Annie Reinking, and I said, I don't think I can be a big, dumb mechanic. I was probably wrong. But they said, well, you don't have to be big and you don't have to be dumb. And the three of us sort of decided that he loved Roxy so much that it didn't matter that she treated him badly. As a matter of fact, he was the only character in the show who was pure. He did what he did for love. And I had the best time. That song, Mr. Cellophane, is supreme. And I'm so grateful that I got to sing it. The first night at City Center, when nobody knew whether the show was going to be a hit or anything, we all loved it ourselves. But I stood backstage for the opening number with James Naughton. And the two of us are standing there and we're hearing the audience not stopping applauding. I mean, not stopping after the opening number. A showstopper opening number could not continue. Then the next number, showstopper. And he and I kept looking at each other and wondering. And the next number, showstopper. And that's what this show became, was an absolute medley of showstoppers.
Walter Bobby created the encores the year before. It was just 1 year before, and we christened it with Fiorello. And we sort of set up. It was going to be all in black and white, so you won't be distracted by color. The color will be in the performances.
And on the lips.
And on the lips, yes, the lips, of course. And then the second year, along comes Chicago, and the men were all, the way I set it up, the look was, all the men wore tuxedos, and all the women wore either cocktail dresses or long evening dresses, because remember, they were holding their scripts, so like that. And then the first entire year was dressed like that, so you really were focusing on the material. Second year started the first, I think we were the third number. We were May, so we were the final presentation. And Walter says, well, I think we should change it slightly. So it was still black and white, but the only person wearing the original concept was James Naughton. Billy Flynn is the only one who wore a tuxedo. Everyone else wore basically their underwear. And so we figured out that dance clothes, Fosse-inspired dance clothes. Many people brought clothes from home. Joe brought his own suit. Bebe brought her own slip, seriously. And I had $1,000 and a pair of scissors. And the rest is history.
I can totally relate to only having $1,000.
Wasn't there also the notion that when we were talking about what to wear, I think Walter said, dress like, bring whatever you have, like you're going to the most fabulous backers audition you've ever been to. So, like, bring your really good, hot black stuff.
Well, and then we decided that the Merry Murder says once you're arrested and thrown in prison, all you wear is your underwear.
Right.
Like that.
I think the colors went from black and white to black and flesh. Basically, black and flesh. So Candy, these are alums. They've been with it from the start. What is your experience? Because I can relate to this too, coming in and out of the show. What has been your experience coming into this legacy that is Chicago?
Coming into this show, it was, first of all, it's an amazing experience because this is my first time ever doing Broadway.
Birthday butt, everybody. Birthday butt.
But coming into the show, I felt like I was coming into a family. The one thing that I noticed is that, with the show going for 21 years, there are so many people that have been a part of the show for years and years and years. And everybody knows one another. And it's not just, the people on stage, but the people behind the scenes when it happens. Like everybody is like a little family. And I guess I had never, been a part of a production where everybody has been knowing each other so long that it just works so well, and they make you feel welcome, like you just join part of the family when you get there.
That's really cool. Anything else you guys want to add to your experience? What was the big opening night like on Broadway?
Crazy.
They picketed the costumes. Yes, they did. Because because I had Loving Hands at Home make them, with seriously, and the big union shops picketed me because we had never, we were still sort of making it by hand. Seriously, the idea of you take dance clothes, you take dance skin, trapezio, this, you cut it up and you pin it on here and you buy a this and a that and you put it together. It's not made in a union shop. You sort of buy it and alter it. And we were picketed, and I remember because they used fluorescent orange for the pickets, and nothing turns me off like fluorescent. Well, you asked, I'm telling you the truth.
It was an honor.
It was an honor to be inundated with fluorescent orange.
I remember we had a, this is a different time, so this story is not as ha 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 as it was. But it was 1996, and we opened at the Richard Rodgers Theater, and we had to delay the opening because there was a bomb scare. This was our very first preview. This is not opening night, but first preview. There was a bomb scare, so we were all standing outside in our tiny little black costumes, waiting to see if we could go back in. And we all had humor about it because, as I say, it was a different time. None of us had PTSD. None of us had been traumatized, and it was a different world. And so we were, we could make light of it. And some of us went into the Imperial Theater where they were doing Les Mis and hung out with them until we could go out. A friend of mine, actually George Wendt from Cheers, was there, and he goes, "Hey, babe, how you doing?" I go, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "I'm coming to see your show." He goes, "Oh, all right, we gotta wait a while." And then they cleared the house, and then we did the show and never thought about it.
So, when did it move to the Schubert? Because that's when I joined it, at the Schubert.
We opened in November, and I think it was in February of '97. Does that sound right?
That's right. It was a small, they didn't think we were going to run.
Yeah.
And so they had a little window of 3 months, and we were a quick load-in.
Yeah.
The fact that it's at the Schubert is a very full circle thing for me. We were mentioning about a chorus line, had a shadow over Chicago back in 1975. Chorus line was at the Schubert Theater, and it was the first show I ever saw on Broadway. And I remember watching all of the dancers from the chorus line come out of the Schubert Theater just like mesmerized. Like I didn't have the courage to meet any of them.
You all bought tickets to a glorified staged reading on an empty stage with no changes of costume except for Roxy, who, because Annie loves changing costume, so she only has 2 and Roxy has like 8. I think it really honors the audience, and it honors the imagination and people who come to be challenged and to be stimulated by stories of the human condition. And there's so many stories. Each of the Mary murderesses, if you think about it, those are heart-wrenching stories. They're told in rhythm and rhyme and beautifully sung, but these are human qualities. So the fact that it was sort of poetry with suggestions of the period, 1920s, or suggestion of the Fosse period, 1970s, and the viewer puts it together in their mind. And I think this is one of the things that ushered in a new wave, because the audience brought the experience of their life to Chicago and then filled it out. So I think it's probably a different experience for every single person who's seeing it. What do you all think? Is that kind of bad?
Also, we happened right while, the pendulum swings back and forth on Broadway, and things come into fashion and go out of fashion, different styles of performance, of production, and so on. And when we opened, that was right at the apex of put everything on the stage. There were huge sets and effects and videos and just loads of stuff. And that has its place, and that's great. But what I think I felt, what William is saying, my experience of that was we did away with all of that. And it was just the material, the lyrics, the music, the musicians, the performers, the choreography, and that nothing got in between the audience and the material and the performers. There was no stuff so that keeping you from what was actually happening. And I think so the experience, at least for a performer with the audience, it was very refreshing for me to be able to have a very direct relationship. I think that's my
Yeah.
my
And there
take
was
on what
a
you're saying.
rawness
is
to it.
The relationship was much more accessible.
And the audience is so used to vaudeville.
Uh-huh.
And this had the sense of a vaudeville show too.
It is a vaudeville.
It is a vaudeville
It's a
show.
musical vaudeville.
That's what I said. Didn't I say that? Okay.
You've played Velma and Mama and Roxy too, right?
Okay, for me, I was on tour with, I just came off a tour of my group Escape, and so I just came directly off tour and went into rehearsal, so I only got 5 days to rehearse for this show, and
Well, now she doesn't gotta learn choreography, y'all.
no, Mama doesn't have much choreography, but I did have
Very
some
short
things
time.
that I needed
Yes.
to do during my song, and so it was a very short time to learn everything. But I already knew, the script. I knew everything coming into my rehearsals. They did have swings to come and rehearse with me, and they did have one day that I had maybe 2 hours to actually rehearse with the current Velma and Roxy that are playing the roles. So basically, each day I only had a few hours of rehearsal. And I just felt like in my mind, I was like, okay, am I going to be ready? Because
It's very
it seemed like
daunting.
it was so fast and to be put in the show. So on the day of show, they had a put-in where a couple hours before the show, they only rehearsed. They had everybody to come in, and we only ran through the parts that I'm actually on stage for with the rest of the cast.
We call that a put-in. Right?
Yes, a put-in. And so we did that the day of show. And they just was like, fly, little bird, fly, you're gonna be all right.
You're off to London. You're off to the races.
But it turned out great. Everything, went well, and after we shook off the nervousness from the first night, I was.
I'm a pro.
Well, I don't want to say I'm a pro. I'm sitting here on stage with you all, and I'm very humbled by being here with you.
Was your dressing room filled with flowers?
Oh, it was.
That's the best
It definitely was. That's the best part. Your family and friends showing up to support you. But yes, it was definitely. It was a quick moment to have to learn everything. And so in most shows, to me, I would feel like if you're not like right in front of everyone, you're not really a part of the scene. But everybody on stage is a part of the scene. Just like you said, the musicians, they're part of the scene. If you're sitting alongside, when he's Amos is singing his song Cellophane, it's like we have to turn our backs to him because he's invisible to us. And so the people alongside, every time I walk past them going to the back, they would be like, you got this, girl. And so they helped me through.
That's great. That's great.
I played Cassie in a chorus line. That's very hard for a couple of reasons, and not least of which is because it was choreographed on one of the most exquisite dancers Broadway has ever had, Donna McKechnie, and she really and truly danced like no one else. And so I've seen some of the greatest dancers, Pam Sousa, Ann Reinking, dance that role, and they're fabulous, but it's Donna's choreography, so it's exhausting, and there's really hard singing in the middle of it, and then, so that's hard. Something Better Than This is a glorious piece of choreography by Bob Fosse in Sweet Charity. And it's just very, very winding. It's very aerobic. And of course, the worst I ever cracked up on stage was doing, in the middle of There's Gotta Be Something Better Than This, doing it when Ann Reinking was playing Charity, and she said something to us on stage that made us laugh hysterically. So we're doing this. It was me, Allison Williams, and Annie, and we're doing this number, laughing hysterically while you're doing really hardcore aerobics. That was very, very difficult. And what was the other one? There's another one.
Only you know.
Velma, but yeah, Yeah, but no, the other ones were rough. Oh, there was another one. I'll think of it and I'll blurt it out inappropriately later.
Of the ones in Chicago that Velma does, or even Roxy for that matter.
What?
I was trying to think, sorry. What?
Are you blurting?
What? No. What?
Did you think of it?
No.
Oh,
Was it harder for you to do Velma or a Roxy?
Oh, that's really, I found that really fascinating. Velma is a much more physically demanding role than Roxy. Even though Roxy's on stage much more and for longer periods of time than Velma is. What Velma has to do is she has to make hairpin turns emotionally and physically also, but she comes feeling one way and then goes into something else. So that's hard. But Velma starts the show on top of the world. She's sitting in her jail cell and she's answering fan mail, and almost immediately her position is usurped by Roxy. And so she spends almost the entire evening desperately trying to get back to the #1 spot. And Roxy starts the show at the absolute bottom, terrible place. And all of a sudden, everything is looking up for her. So she spends the whole show going, but now look, I got me a world full of yes. And I'm going to get me some, that's her whole, so you spend the evening like that until the very end when it gets taken away from you. So it's a very different experience of one desperately trying to get ahead and one languishing in and enjoying the fame that her dreams coming true. Because this was a movie with Ginger Rogers and play and so on, but when Bob first made this into a musical with John and Fred, that it was inspired by the Watergate hearings and the Watergate trials. I hadn't heard that. Did you hear that? Yeah. So, Bob was always ahead of his time, and he was then, but now times have caught up, and I think everybody sees that.
For some reason, I think it's the spirit of Annie herself who loves dressing up. You just wanted 2 outfits done, don't mess with me. She brings her own slip. But we retired that slip, no one can wear the slip but you. I had to design a slip. She's the one and only slip. Oh, one and only. So,
And wait a minute. No Amos ever.
No Amos wore that suit. In fact, we've never had a suit on Amos ever again. It's always in fact, we don't even let him wear black and white. He's gray because your suit was gray. That's the nod to you, thank you.
Oh, God bless you.
And every Amos wears baggy gray pants, scuffed shoes, cream-colored shirt, a disgusting necktie, and a baggy gray sweater. Now, that's not what you wore. We had to break the mold after Joel Brown. Totally. But with Roxy, I will tell you, I've designed, I think I've had about 50 Roxys. We made a list. And every now and then, I totally redesign them with the same fabric. In fact, you can go online on my, what's it called? The line, you type me in.com.
What's your website?
And you can see my symbol. And I have, Brooke Shields got her own, Melanie Griffith, her own, and you got, all 3 of yours were your own.
I got my own.
But I want to tell you, when we had our first African-American Roxy, Robin Gibbons, I had to totally reimagine, because with darker skin, black lace doesn't have the same effect. So she and I sort of held hands and experimented in front of a mirror. And if you look at Robin's look, it's a micro slip, because we thought we want to see more of your skin, but yet it has to look like there's a slip. Just look it up. And so we had to, that was the most, and of course then immediately everyone only wanted to wear hers. And I said, but, so I'm still making them up. I'm still making them up.
We're leaving you with a homework assignment to look up Robin Gibbons' costume.